right. I don't think we're recording started. The recording has started. Hey, folks, it's Rick. Welcome back once again. I'm joined today by Mike Nellis. You might know Mike from White Guys for Harris.
White Dudes for Harris.
White Dudes for Harris. Oh, excuse me. Dude guy, White Dudes for Harris. And he's also a really sharp observer of American politics today. So I'm glad to have him with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, I want to start out by asking you a question that's sort of the moment. While we're recording this on Monday, we just got news late last night that the shooter in Minnesota was arrested. Thank God. But I think there's one thing that you and I, you know a lot about the AI world. There was an incredible tidal wave of both human and AI generated bullshit content about Minnesota that flooded to the zone out there almost instantaneously. And do you think people are aware enough about this? Do they understand it enough at this point that this is the future and it's not pretty with the way the right in particular now will weaponize any tragedy to try to turn it into, oh, this is a woke blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I mean, they just try to turn anything into a conspiracy theory now and they're picking everything apart. It feels to me like a dangerous moment where I don't quite know what the solutions are, but people are just putting themselves in their own echo chambers. And there's now, I assume, tens of millions of Americans that believe that this shooter was hired by Tim Walz to take out this
because they
senator
voted against the health care.
Right. Which is not.
Oh, shit. That's the word you're looking for.
I mean, you've got United States senators are posting about it. Mike Lee's posting about it. Frankly, I think Mike Lee has crossed the Rubicon of, what a lot of politicians will do is they'll sometimes press their nose up against the window to get a little bit of support or online donations, but he's just fully through the looking glass. He should resign. I really think
Mike Lee today is making Marjorie Taylor Greene look like the reasonable person in the room.
Right.
Which is fucking crazy.
Right. When Lauren Boebert is slow down, there's a problem.
Right. When Lauren Boebert is hey, ease up on the throttle there, Chief. It does strike me that while that is something that the MAGAs have been very unified on, there are other stresses in their coalition right now that I think Democrats have yet to fully weigh and fully figure out. This whatever is going to happen in the Middle East, which, by the way, the old joke, yes, we're going to pivot to the Pacific right after we finish with the Middle East again, is one that I've been hearing since the 1980s. But right now, you've got a big faction of MAGA who doesn't want to do anything in the Middle East, a big faction of MAGA that wants to go and level Tehran and dismantle their nuclear program. There are divisions inside MAGA that people, I think, on the left tend to look at it as too much of a cohesive single unit. Yeah. And I think they should take some heart by the fact that it's not.
No. And I mean, I think that my party has kind of created this image of a MAGA coalition that doesn't really exist, where the loudest voices on social media represent the broader coalition. But Trump built this idea of American first, which is we're going to put America before everything else. And what that means to a lot of people is, hey, we're not going to spend money in Ukraine. We're not going to spend money in the Middle East. We're not going to start new wars. And that's appealing to a lot of people. I got into politics because I opposed the Iraq war. And I thought the Iraq war was really stupid and it was a poor use of money. We were sending our troops somewhere for a reason I didn't understand. We were sending them ill-prepared too, which drives me nuts. So Iran feels very similar to that. And right now, the most salient analysis I've seen of why we shouldn't go to war in Iran has come from Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. In the same way that on Medicaid, Steve Bannon and Laura Loomer have been the two leading voices on why we shouldn't cut Medicaid.
And Josh Hawley, of all people.
Yeah. Well, and Josh Hawley on big tech is pretty good in terms of breaking up monopolies and not allowing them to dominate society with algorithms. I agree with Josh Hawley. So
I mean, and Josh Hawley was no, keep Lena Khan. What? Yeah. I mean, it is a weird, I think there are some weird chemical things happening out there where more engaged people are starting to think about a world on the left and the right, that is radically transforming because of AI.
Yeah.
It's radically transforming. And I think,
well, Rick, keep in mind, 20 years ago, you and I would have been at each other's throats on different sides of the aisle right now. Now we're doing a fairly friendly combo.
Yeah. And look, as a guy who believes in the free market, we don't have one.
No.
We've got massive regulatory capture in this country. This 10-year ban on AI restrictions or AI conditions in the big, beautiful bill has emerged as a left-right talking point where people on the far left and the far right are both going, wait a minute, in 10 years, it'll be robot overlords. We can't just let this thing breeze through like this. So I do think there's like I said, some interesting coalition building opportunities for folks in the center and the center right, center left to come together and peel off pieces of the shakier edges of the coalition on the right, particularly because the internal dynamics on the MAGA side are bounded by a clock, and that clock is that Trump will not be here forever.
Right.
But so
unless,
you were
unless he runs for his third term, which I mean, good luck to him.
At some point, the Filet-O-Fish is going to catch up. At some point,
Castro lived for a long time, so like
at some point, the Kentucky Fried Chicken will have its revenge.
I mean, I believe that Donald Trump is in cognitive decline, and it will become more obvious over time.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You'll see that. So I don't think he'll be able to run for a fourth term or a third term.
I think that's right. So I do want to bring that loop back around to the AI question. You were just in London at a conference talking about the future of AI.
Yeah,
and talking about how it's going to impact jobs in society, and this is something that it's not. This is not a secret to the American public that there is a big swath of gray and white collar jobs. Yeah, the first automation revolution took out a lot of people who worked on the line.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who worked with their hands. They were replaced by robots or automated processes, or they were outsourced to people who would do it for pennies for pennies an hour. Debate that all we want. But AI is about to take a whack out of white collar and gray collar jobs, semi-professional and professional jobs that no one's really figured out how bad that's going to be yet. Talk to me a little bit about what you were talking about in London, and let me get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I mean, a couple of things to add in here. The first is if you're uncomfortable with the pace of technological change over the last 20 years, where we went from
too bad
no smartphones to today, where we've got supercomputers in our pockets, like you're going to find the next 10 years extremely uncomfortable. And that's why I have been one of the few political practitioners to like run through a brick wall and build the first AI tech startup for Democratic campaigns and really run through that and try to, the political space moves really slow. In my opinion, like somebody asked me a question at this conference, which was, do you think the American federal government or the state governments are going to regulate AI? And I'm like, we've had social media for 20 years. They're just talking about regulating social media. So maybe in the next 100 years, they'll regulate AI.
Right. Section 230 is now 20 damn years old.
Right. And vastly outdated for what is necessary to just 100%. At a bare minimum protect kids. Because I spend a lot of time, I have a 6-year-old boy. I spend a lot of time thinking about what the future looks like for him. How do I protect him from social media? How do I make him AI proof so that he can get a job and not have to support him for the rest of my life? Because I don't want to work forever either. So with AI, I'll put this in the context of Trump's crusade to bring manufacturing jobs back to America, which I don't believe that he's going to do. I also don't believe he's sincere about it. I think it's just political opportunism. But he wants to move these tariffs forward so we can bring all these American manufacturing jobs home. So we're going to suddenly create massive factories in Michigan and throughout the Midwest and the rest of the country. If we do that, let's say he can do that in the next couple of years, and maybe it creates a small amount of new jobs in the United States to build cars and iPhones and stuff like that. Forget all the other reasons we can't build iPhones in the United States for a second.
Right.
Within the next couple of years, we're going to have iPhones that are built without ever touching a human hand until it makes it to you. We're going to have cars that are not built until they make it to the lot. They don't touch a human hand. Because automation in AI is going to be so quick in its advancements that those manufacturing jobs are going to be gone. And that's before you get to white collar jobs. Think about all the people that are doing data entry and writing in the healthcare industry alone. Sure. That's going to make things incredibly more efficient for them. And there's going to be other problems in that. We talk about bias in AI, and we talk about the mistakes and hallucinations. Those are real things. But we're going to eliminate so many jobs. And so the societal situation that we find ourselves in creates this product of like, how do we keep people employed? How do we keep people with a purpose? Do we move to like that sort of like, Swedish, Danish model where people actually work less because they don't need to work as much and the government supports them more? Do we need a universal basic income? I think there's conversations that have to happen, and we're too busy arguing about whether or not we should be kicking 16 million people off of the healthcare to give rich billionaires another tax cut. So we're not talking about anything that's forward looking when 80% of the population is already getting killed. And
I think if we're a country that is going to cut veterans' health care and throw grandma into the street by cutting Medicaid and throwing her out of a nursing home, we're probably not a country ready to talk about UBI yet.
No,
Okay.
but also,
weirdly, I think we might actually need to.
Yeah,
you know,
it is a necessary conversation. I think
it's kind of anathema of, in some ways, but we're not. There's no world in which this Republican Party adopts even some of the models that people like Sam Altman and Bill Gates and others have talked about, where we tax AI, where we figure out a tax structure where that starts to be a revenue driver to replace the tax revenue that we would have gotten from humans. And we are so unwilling to have these hard conversations in this country that, and look, when you did, white dudes, it was a hard conversation for some people to want to have.
Yeah.
A lot of people, including a lot of Democrats that I was talked to, were like, oh, I don't know, man. Well, that's just that they weren't comfortable having a tough conversation. But we're at a point where we better have those, or we're going to get really, really behind the eight ball.
Yeah. And China is taking this very seriously. And I think we need to acknowledge the fact that we're in the middle of an arms race, and it doesn't have to do with nuclear weapons. It has to do with AI technology and how we structure our societies. Right. And we're trapped in this. Like, we've got one political party, the Republicans, that's so focused on how to recreate the 1950s, which is never going to happen again.
1850s.
The 1850s. Yeah, maybe I was being generous there for a second. But then we have another political party, the Democratic Party, that's like so lost in like tribalism, and we can't get anything done, and we don't have a cohesive message, and so it's just like it is a messy situation, and we're not getting anything done to help people, right? Like, I mean, government should be about improving people's lives and constituent services. So it's like fixing a pothole and building a bridge and helping to make it a little bit easier to retire with dignity.
Right.
We're so far away from doing any of that it like makes me pull my hair out, because we spent all weekend talking about that dumb military parade, but we're not doing anything to help people. And it just.
Right. At the same moment we're talking about the military parade, the Veterans Administration today comes out and says doctors can choose not to treat patients based on they're still forbidden on race, sexual orientation, and religious, but now they can decline to treat patients based on other factors they choose. The fuck is that about? But we don't. That's a conversation that gets weedy and boring and intense and painful, and nobody wants to have that conversation. They want to talk about the military parade, which is perfectly fun to talk about, but it doesn't also at some point hit the essential seriousness of the moment that we're in about everything else.
Well, also, if you're a part of the MAGA coalition, I want you to think about this for a second. Like, you live in a smaller community, which is where you want to live. You have less access to the type of healthcare resources that I have in the city of Chicago. A lot of people, like, I have family that live in like rural Pennsylvania. They have to fly to Philadelphia to get medical care. I had a relative with cancer, had to fly to, I forget which university in Philadelphia. But like, imagine if he shows up and he's got a Donald Trump bumper sticker on his car, and the doctor is like, I'm not going to serve you because you're a Donald Trump voter. Like, that wouldn't be right. It's not right in the other way either, if they're kicking liberals off from the support that they need. So like, I just like, there's a lot of just like poorly thought out ideas coming out of this Republican Party, coming out of this administration. And I think they don't see the reverse of that. The Harvard thing is another perfect example. We're setting an expectation that Donald Trump thinks he can tell Harvard who they can or cannot hire, what they can't teach, what students they could let in. Does a Democratic administration get to do that to Liberty University? I don't think so.
Or Hillsdale, or Claremont,
or Notre Dame.
Any number of these institutions that if we did it, as they, to make that classic counterfactual thing, if it was people on the right or people on the left are making the same kind of argument about Liberty or Claremont or Hillsdale, Republicans would be in the streets screaming their heads off.
And they would be right to be, by the way.
Sure.
Because that's poor use of government. Jocelyn Benson, who's the Secretary of State for Michigan, she's running for governor right now. She has a phrase she talks about, which is government right now is showing up in all the places you don't want it and nowhere where you need it. And I think that,
yes,
I think it's really well said to the problem.
I think that's very much on point. I think that's exactly where we're at, is the intrusiveness, that it's kind of a joke, but it's like from the don't tread on me to tread on me harder, daddy attitude is really not where, a traditional old school former Republican like myself ever thought we'd end up, because this idea of government power has always been something where Republicans were supposedly skeptical of it. They were supposedly worried that it could be abused, or concerned that it would be put to the wrong uses, or that it would get in the wrong hands and people would use it to violate the Constitution, or any number of other things. And now it's like, no, we need more federal intervention everywhere all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, in California, ironically, in suing the federal government about the National Guard troops, California made a more powerful 10th Amendment argument than I've seen any conservative make in about 25 years.
Mm. And
so I do think we're in a world where, like, that upside down nature of things, again, looping back to the beginning of the conversation, it's, that's where there's an opportunity space, I think, for folks in the center right, center left, to start talking to people in ways that hopefully sort of begin to reformat some of the terms of this political crisis that we find ourselves in.
I've been articulating this problem to my clients as just democratic federalism, right? And what does that look like for the Democratic Party? And to me, it's like, if I ran for Congress tomorrow, my platform would probably be something along the lines of, a strong social safety net that makes sure that you can put food on the table, have a roof over your house, take care of your kids, take care of your parents, retire with dignity, which I think is what most people want. And that means that some things have to change, and we have to add in some new programs that we can get into. But then for the most part, unless there's a clear public safety risk, like there was during COVID, or there is with like smoking, right, government should leave you alone and let you just live your life. Shouldn't be telling you who to marry, shouldn't be telling you what to eat, shouldn't be telling you, like, I went to Canada not too long ago and I tried to order a burger medium, and they told me that by law they had to make it meat well done. And I was like, it's my choice if I want to eat a medium.
Right.
Burger.
Right. I will take that risk.
Right. I'll take that risk, and like, you let me go on with my life. And I think that that's a fair place to be. And we got to get better about talking about that, because in my lifetime, I voted for, my very first election was Barack Obama's election in 2008. Okay. In my view, and I loved John McCain. So like, I'm not knocking at John McCain, but from my vantage point as someone who's like 37 years old, I have always believed the Democratic Party to be the small party, because the biggest issues to me, the Republican Party was the big government party. They wanted to tell you who you could marry or couldn't marry. And now that's just like slid all the way down the path to the point that, we basically have a king to a lot of people who worship Donald Trump. And that's what all these protests were about this weekend, which is that we don't have a king. And
I will tell you, way back before Trump, back in the 2010 window, I wrote a memo to a bunch of my political clients saying, you're all wrong about gay marriage. And what business is it of the state to tell consenting adults who they can marry? And the reaction, I got lit up by Rush Limbaugh of all people, and like,
so I think
kind of, but it did end up, with this. It gave me this perspective that it was not the small government party. It was a much more dangerous and much more pernicious and nudgy and shitty party of people who, put the whole, they wanted to deploy the power of the state, after all, just for their own social purposes.
Yeah. Well, and I think before you transition to the next thing, Rick, I think a book worth reading. So we have the new Pope, Pope Leo. I read the book that his namesake wrote, Pope Leo XIII, before him, called Rerum Novarum, which is this like turn of the century industrial revolution encyclical that he wrote, and it's about like a scathing critique of socialism, but a scathing critique of unfettered capitalism that is as relevant today as it's ever been. And I highly recommend people read it, because I think it'll put into context how
I'll have a look.
The left gets it wrong, but the right can get it wrong too, on value and personal freedoms, which is worth reading, in my opinion.
Well, that idea of if you take out some of that idea from this meaningful fraction of the Republican base that are more, at least self-identifiedly libertarian, and say, look, we're gonna let you be you. I think I think it's better for the country. First off, I think it's much better for the nation to have a broader sense of the Democrats are a party that wants to do things and accomplish things, but one of the things they don't want to do is micromanage your life on a daily basis.
Right. Well, and I think something the Republicans do a good job of is that they put like family at the center of that a lot, and they go, "Hey, we want you to be able to control what happens to your kids." And like on the trans rights issue, I think from a framing perspective, that is right. Like as me, I want to be able to take care of my kids and make decisions that I think are best for them. And so I'd like the Democratic Party co-opt that, because I'm tired of Republicans telling us that they're the party of family values when they're not. So
no, that's a pernicious level lie, not just a basic lie.
Yeah.
So, your experience doing White Dudes for Harris, this is a subject we've all talked about a lot lately. You have, I have, this question of, where men are in American politics today. And it's an uneasy spot for a lot of men. They don't feel at home in the Democratic Party any longer. They feel like they are assertively disliked by a lot of the Democratic base. And I don't think that's entirely right, but I don't think it's entirely wrong either.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you've had any thoughts since the election on where that sort of whole idea is in your mind. Like, where does that work need to go now? I think it has to continue in some capacity, but where does it need to go from here?
Yeah, so I have a ton of thoughts on this, and I can tell you is like, I am sometimes jokingly referred to as the Democratic Party's white man, which I don't really know how I feel about that generally, but here I am. But I do think like there are large parts of the Democratic Party base that are uncomfortable even having this conversation, and there were a ton of people who thought me, Ross, Brad, Tim, the rest of the people that created White Dudes for Harris, they thought we were crazy for putting a call together. I had one friend that like likened it to a Klan meeting, and I was like, "You're ridiculous. We're getting on a call and we're talking about like our emotions and supporting a black woman for president. That couldn't be further away from a Klan meeting. You guys need to chill out a little bit." But I do think like there's cultural issues at play, and there's economic issues at play that make this really salient. To me, I just from a very broad societal critique, I think in the last decade, there's been a well-intentioned attempt to let women and people of color have more power and opportunity and access to lead in the Democratic Party and in society. And we should do nothing to get in the way of that, because I think that progress has been extraordinary. However, in so doing, we've had a lot of white men like myself who didn't feel comfortable stepping forward and talking and having a conversation. And we created a void for Republicans and for conservative-leaning people like an Andrew Tate or an Elon Musk to create these spaces that go, "Hey, let me talk about what it's like to be a man." So Andrew Tate creates this giant audience of young men talking about what it's like to be a man and what being a real man is, which to him, a real man takes and takes and takes. To me, a real man protects and provides.
Yes.
And then he leads people directly into this Trump MAGA world. And Rogan is very similar to that, although I don't think Rogan's not the same as Tate, but Rogan kind of leads you into that direction. Theo Von kind of leads you into that direction. There's a lot of guys who do that. Jordan Peterson does that from a Christian ethno-state perspective. There's no liberal equivalent of that speaking to them and going, "Hey, here's what it means to be a man while you take care of people," because men build things and men care about people and they protect the women in their lives. And they're not going to blame them on that. And then on the economics of it for a second, let's talk about what young men are going through generally, not just white men, but like just generally. This is the first generation of young men, likely in the history of humanity, that are going to make less money than the women of their same age. You are going to make less money if you're under 30 than a woman under 30 on average. Your women are twice as more likely to graduate from college. Women are twice as more likely to buy a house right now under 30. There's no roadmap for that. And so it makes sense that a lot of men are disillusioned and lonely and unhappy and can't find a date. And it creates dating pool problems where the women who are looking.
Scott Galloway has talked a lot about this.
Yeah, Galloway talks about this a lot. Yeah.
Like there's like that structural imbalance is now turned into, you want to know why the incels are there. It's because there is no third space anymore for people to socialize or interact, and the discomforts have become so definitional that it's really hard to make it. It's really hard to make it to do the things that people would do to meet and breed and bond and all those things that Republicans tell us all the time are really important. Yeah.
Well, and where right now is it okay to be a man? And I think about that as like, and be men as like, who you are inside and be kind of immature and be a little silly and enjoy the sports. And it feels like on the left, there is a lot of judgment on that.
Oh,
I get made fun of by people on the left because I like professional wrestling. I've liked professional wrestling since I was like 5 years old.
Right.
I still like it. I find it to be entertaining in the same way that I like Love is Blind and reality TV and Traitors. I'm allowed to like what I like without being judged. I'm not going to make fun of somebody for liking the Gilmore Girls reunion. Like
right.
I don't like it all. Or Handmaid's Tale. I generally hate Handmaid's Tale. I find it to be like sad and miserable for the sake of it. But I watched it a little bit with my wife. I just like, sure. I think we need to be okay with people being different and having different voices in the party who speak differently, because we don't have a lot of men who can speak forcefully about what it's like to be a man in the Democratic Party. And that's a problem.
And it doesn't, I think the construct, it doesn't mean that you are depriving women of something to have honest conversations about the problems that men face.
No. And you hear a lot of women on the Democratic Party side, they'll say, well, white men just want to be the main character of the Democratic Party again. And I go, no, I have zero interest in being the main character of the Democratic Party, but I would like to be a supporting player in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I frame it to a lot of people this way is, we talk a lot about black women being the backbone of the Democratic Party coalition. They absolutely are. And Kamala Harris won something like 89% of black women in the last election, which is impressive. But it is an erosion from what we typically get. So it's worth noting that. And then she won about 41% of white men, which is poor and pathetic, but a little bit better than Joe Biden did 4 years ago. But in raw numbers, for a second, that is twice as many people. So twice as many white men voted for Kamala Harris, roughly, than black women, because that's how many white men there are in this country. So if you'd like to win elections, if you'd like to build sustainable coalitions that can make progress on the issues that we care about, if you want to bring back Roe v. Wade protections, if you want to cool down the temperature in this country, you're going to need a lot of white men to wake the fuck up and start treating.
That is a fact.
Yeah. And we're going to have to do actual work to do that. And it isn't going to come by lecturing people online or judging them about their choices, because that never works. For sure. I'm married. I know that, like, I told you.
I have been. All right. Well, Mike Nellis, listen, man, I want to thank you for coming on. Great conversation, brother. Let's, I'm going to actually be in your fair city in about 24 hours. So,
well, let me know if you want to grab a beer or something.
Well, let's try. Okay. I'll give you a shout. Thanks, cool. Mike. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate you.
Whitney's left us. She's abandoned us.
She's mad.